The email had been sitting in his inbox for 6 days. Every morning he opened it. Every evening he closed it. The subject line never changed. Job offer, final response required. At the bottom of the message, one sentence quietly waited for him. Please let us know your decision by Friday. Friday was tomorrow. He had wanted this opportunity for years. Better salary, a new city, more responsibility, a chance to build the life he had imagined ever since graduating. So why couldn't he answer? His cursor hovered over two buttons countless times. Accept, decline. Neither felt right, because each one destroyed the other. If he accepted, he would leave behind familiar streets, his family, his routine, friends he had known for years. If he declined, he might never receive another opportunity like it. Every possibility seemed to contain another loss. The decision followed him everywhere. At breakfast, he imagined saying yes. By lunch, saying no felt wiser. Driving home, he changed his mind again. Before sleeping, he searched the internet one more time. How do I know if I'm making the right decision? Hundreds of articles, hundreds of videos, hundreds of opinions, each promising certainty, each making him even less certain. The following morning, he asked his coworkers, "What would you do?" One said, "Take the money." Another replied, "Stay close to your family." His parents offered different advice. His friends disagreed with each other. Even strangers online seemed convinced they knew what he should do. By evening, he had collected dozens of answers, yet none of them felt like his own. That night, unable to think any longer, he left his apartment and walked through the city, without direction, without purpose. The streets were unusually quiet. Shops were closing. Traffic had almost disappeared. Eventually, he found himself in the city's botanical garden. The gates remained open for an evening exhibition. Soft lights illuminated winding paths between enormous trees. Everything felt strangely peaceful. He sat on an old wooden bench. For the first time all day, no one was giving him advice. No notifications. No opinions. Only silence. It lasted less than a minute. His phone vibrated. Another message. "Have you decided yet?" He sighed and placed the phone face down beside him. "You've been asking everyone except yourself." The voice came from the other end of the bench. An elderly man sat quietly beneath the branches of an ancient oak tree. He wasn't reading. He wasn't using a phone. He simply watched the leaves moving gently in the night breeze. The young man forced a tired smile. "I've asked myself 1,000 times." The old man shook his head. "No, you've asked your fear." The words landed immediately. The young man frowned. "What does that mean?" The old man looked toward the towering tree above them. "When a tree grows, it never asks the forest for permission." Silence. The young man looked down. "I just don't want to make the wrong choice." The old man smiled. "Are you afraid of choosing?" He paused. "Or are you afraid of becoming the person that choice will require you to become?" The question struck deeper than anything he had heard all week, because suddenly the new city wasn't the real problem. Neither was the salary, nor the distance. What frightened him was something much harder to admit. If he accepted, he could no longer pretend he was waiting for the right opportunity. He would have to become someone capable of living it. The old man slowly stood. He extended his hand. "My name," he said calmly, "is Friedrich Nietzsche." Above them, the wind moved through the branches. The deadline was still tomorrow, but for the first time, the real question had changed. The young man remained seated long after the introduction. The garden had grown quieter. The distant sounds of the city seemed to disappear behind the rustling leaves. He looked at Nietzsche for a long moment before finally speaking. "So you're saying I'm not afraid of making the wrong decision?" Nietzsche smiled. "I am saying something far more uncomfortable." The young man waited. "You are afraid that one decision will destroy every version of yourself that never came to exist." The sentence hung in the cool night air. He frowned. "I don't understand." Nietzsche slowly stood and gestured toward a narrow path lined with tall trees. "Walk with me." They wandered through the botanical garden in silence. After a few moments, Nietzsche stopped where the path divided into two directions. One trail disappeared into a grove of towering pines. The other curved around a quiet lake illuminated by soft lanterns. Which path is a better one? Nietzsche asked. The young man studied both. I can't tell. Exactly. You cannot walk both. The young man looked from one trail to the other. But what if I choose the wrong one? Nietzsche gently shook his head. Every path demands a sacrifice. You are mourning the lives you haven't even lived. The words unsettled him. He realized that for 6 days, he hadn't been imagining one future. He had been trying to preserve every possible future. He wanted the new career without losing his old life. He wanted adventure without uncertainty, growth without discomfort, a new beginning without saying goodbye. Nietzsche continued walking. Most people do not fear choosing. They fear closing the doors that choosing requires. The young man suddenly remembered something from his childhood. When he was 8 years old, he had stood in an ice cream shop for nearly 10 minutes, unable to choose between two flavors. His father had laughed and said, "Son, while you're deciding, they're both melting." He smiled for the first time that evening. "I've always been like this." Nietzsche nodded. "Then perhaps this has never been about your job." They reached a glass greenhouse filled with rare tropical plants. Some stretched toward the ceiling. Others twisted around old wooden supports. Nietzsche stopped beside a young sapling planted near the entrance. "Do you know why this tree is small?" The young man shrugged. "Because it's young." "No," Nietzsche replied calmly. "It is small because it has committed itself to growing in one direction." He looked confused. What if it tried to grow in every direction at once? The young man imagined it. It wouldn't grow. It would exhaust itself. Nietzsche's eyes met his. "So, why do you expect a human life to be different?" The question lingered. The young man thought about the endless spreadsheets he had made, lists of pros and con salary comparisons, cost of living calculations, advice from friends, advice from family, online forums, videos, podcasts, hours spent trying to eliminate uncertainty. Yet none of them had answered the question that truly mattered. Not which choice is safer, but who am I willing to become? As they continued walking, they passed a small reflecting pool. The young man caught his own reflection in the still water. For a moment, he imagined two versions of himself standing side by side. One stayed, one left. Both looked back at him. Both seemed convinced the other life might have been better. He finally understood. No decision could protect him from regret. Every meaningful choice would leave another life behind. Nietzsche quietly broke the silence. People spend years searching for the perfect decision. He paused. Yet perfection is impossible for those who refuse to sacrifice. The young man looked at the reflection one last time. It slowly disappeared as a breeze disturbed the water. He took a deep breath. "So how do I know which path to choose?" Nietzsche smiled, not with certainty, but with understanding. "You don't. You choose the path. And then you become the person capable of walking it." For the first time since receiving the email, the young man stopped searching for a guarantee. Perhaps certainty had never been waiting at the end of the decision. Perhaps it was something built one step after another. Friday arrived. The deadline had finally come. The email was still there. The same subject line. The same two choices. Accept, decline. For the first time all week, he didn't rush to open it. Instead, he made coffee, opened the window, watched the city slowly wake beneath a pale morning sky. People hurried toward buses. Store owners unlocked their doors. Life continued without waiting for anyone to feel completely ready. He smiled to himself. Perhaps that had always been true. He sat at his desk and read the email one final time. His heart still beat faster than usual. The fear hadn't disappeared. Neither had the uncertainty. Then he remembered Nietzsche's words. You choose the path. And then you become the person capable of walking it. For days, he had treated the decision like an exam, as though somewhere there existed one perfect answer and one irreversible mistake. But life had never worked that way. Every meaningful choice demanded courage before it offered clarity. He closed his eyes, not to escape the decision, but to stop listening to every voice except his own, the opinions of friends, the expectations of family, the endless advice from strangers, the imaginary futures that had kept him awake every night. One by one, they became quieter, until only one question remained. Not which life guarantees happiness, but which life asks me to grow. When he opened his eyes again, his hand no longer hesitated. He clicked. The decision was made. The screen changed. A confirmation message appeared. He looked at it for several seconds. Then something unexpected happened. The relief he had imagined didn't arrive. Neither did panic. Only silence. A calm, unfamiliar silence. He laughed softly. For 6 days, he had believed the decision itself was carrying all the weight. In reality, the heaviest burden had been refusing to choose. Later that evening, he returned to the botanical garden. The same winding paths, the same ancient oak, the same wooden bench. Nietzsche was already there, watching the leaves dance in the evening breeze. Without asking, he seemed to know. You chose. The young man nodded. I did. And was it the perfect decision? He smiled. I don't think that question matters anymore. Nietzsche's eyes brightened. Good. Because there are no perfect decisions. There are only people who spend their lives waiting for one. They walked together through the garden as the sun disappeared beyond the trees. The young man realized something that had never occurred to him before. Every person he admired, every explorer, every artist, every entrepreneur, every scientist, every leader, had eventually stood where he had stood, facing uncertainty, without guarantees, without knowing the ending. They had simply accepted a truth he had been resisting. A decision does not reveal your future. It reveals your willingness to create one. As they reached the garden gate, Nietzsche stopped. He looked toward the city beyond the trees. Thousands of people were still searching for certainty before taking the first step. Then he spoke one final time. The greatest tragedy is not choosing the wrong path. He paused. The greatest tragedy is standing at the crossroads so long that your life becomes a road you never walked. The philosopher disappeared into the evening. The young man remained where he was, watching the empty path ahead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new doubts, new decisions. But something fundamental had changed. He no longer believed courage came after certainty. He understood that certainty is often a reward for courage. He took one last look toward the road stretching into the distance. Then he began walking, not because every question had been answered, but because he finally understood that the person he wanted to become could never be found by standing still.